All right, so welcome back to our Asynchronous Fridays. Glad to have you here listening. It is going to be another day of looking at our multiple choices. So we're going to go through a couple, sessions of multiple choice where I'm leading it. There may also be days where you are trying it completely on your own because I don't want you to completely lose touch with what it feels like to once again go through this completely independently. Even though, of course, in the beginning of the year, we're going to be doing much stronger supports around how to kind of break this stuff down. And so it's been a year since I've read this passage. And so very much, once again, looking forward to finding out, what this is all about again. And so definitely going to be reading it for the first time, definitely going to be modeling my thinking around what I'm coming across and exactly how I kind of attack the reading. But keep in mind, just like we talked about last week, you need to make sure that you have both you're looking at all of the passages so you can see which ones are easiest, choosing the easiest ones first. Remember, easy typically means modern day. It typically means a subject that you know a lot about. And so if you can choose those readings first, you will definitely boost and increase your score. Because if it is a difficult passage, once again, there's no penalty for guessing, and you can kind of guess on the more difficult ones, and that'll once again boost your score. And so we're going to go into this reading today. And we are going to once again kind of talk about what you should be taking away. You should never like fully like skim, but you should definitely make sure that you have a good grasp on what the topic is before you start to maybe like read through it a little bit more quickly. And so, what we're going to do is dive into this reading and see what we can get from it, and then we'll talk just a little bit again about process of elimination on the questions. And so with that in mind, we'll go ahead and get started. So, and by the way, if you listen to this as a like podcast style without the video, that's completely fine. It might actually be easier and better to listen to it and follow along yourself rather than watching the video, but whatever works best for you. So, the only purpose of being in politics is to strive for the values and ideals we believe in: freedom, justice, what we Europeans call solidarity, but you might call respect for and help for others. These are decent democratic values we all avow, but alongside the values, we know we need a hard headed pragmatism, a real politic required to give us any chance of translating those values into the practical world we live in. And so, you may not know much about who the speaker is, but we can learn a couple things based on what they're talking about. And so the phrase "what we Europeans call" solidarity, and so I'm noticing that the speaker is European. And so whoever it is, the speaker is European, and they are talking about freedom and justice, and they are talking about the purpose of those politics. And I'm assuming, because the person identifies them what we Europeans call solidarity, but you might call respect and help for others. Perhaps this is Europe talking to a different country and a different continent. And so I'm thinking, because I'm American, and it is a American centered, we grew up in this thing where we think everything's America, 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 even though it's not. I'm assuming that it's actually addressing America, but it may not be. It might be addressing somewhere else. But when I see things like freedom, justice, democratic values, all of those individual words kind of like make me think America. And so it may not be. Those are, those values are not specific to America, but they are definitely associated with America. And so I'm thinking this might be a case where a European, probably like a European leader, is speaking to Americans. Now, that little dash right there, a real politic. Anytime that's something like that, they're always kind of just like giving a second definition. So, but alongside the values, we need a hard-headed pragmatism, a real politic. So whatever hard-headed pragmatism is, I know that real politic is the same thing. And you may not have heard the word pragmatic before, but pragmatic and pragmatism means something that is like realistic. And so you've got two kind of ends of the scale. You've got one side, which is like an idealist who's like, oh, these are the ideals we should live by. And I think that in a perfect world, it's this, it's this, it's this. On the other side of that, like dreamer, you know what I mean? That idealist is the pragmatist. And so it's the person who's like, well, sure, it'd be nice to do that, but that doesn't exist in the world. And so it's the person who is like, once again, but what does it look like in practice? What does it look like in the real world? How would we do that here? You can't just say like, this is what we should do. You have to work in the world of like, this is what we can do. And so the idealists and the dreamers tend to be more on that, like, I hope and I wish this could be true. Whereas the pragmatists are like, but what can we actually get done? What can we do? And so I'm thinking, that's this is going to be important, and whatever is going on, whatever this is going to be about, is going to be about these two things: the kind of like dreamer and then the pragmatist. And this person right now is kind of telling us that you need to have pragmatism alongside these values to make sure that they translate into what's going on in the real world. And so we'll see exactly what this is all about as we continue. So the same tension exists in the two views of international affairs. One is utilitarian. Each nation maximizes its own self-interest. And so here we've got utilitarian. The definition is given to us right afterwards. Each nation maximizes its own self-interest. The other is utopian. We try to create a better world. And so here I'm learning utilitarian means my interest is best. Utopian means we are creating a better world together. So it's a value of an individual country in this case, or a value of like a better world together. And so it says these same two tensions exist between these two. And so he's kind of already comparing, or she's already comparing these ideas of idealistic democracy versus like politics and how you actually like translate it. And then we've got this idea of like self-interest kind of with utopia. And so, yeah, it'd be like the utopia would be in line with like the dreamer, and then the politics and the pragmatism would be in line with the utilitarian. So we're kind of creating these parallels. Today, I want to suggest that more than ever before, those views are merging. And so, okay, like this person is going to talk about how like both of these things can come together. We can have our own self-interests in mind and create a better world. I advocate for an enlightened self-interest that puts fighting for our values right at the heart of the policies necessary to protect our nations. And so this person is talking about protecting nations. And so obviously something has happened or something is going on in terms of like nations need protecting, and this enlightened self-interest. So it shouldn't be just like self-interest, but it should be like a higher version or an enlightened version of self-interest. Engagement in the world on the basis of these values is not isolationism from it. It is the hard-headed pragmatism for the 21st century. And so we are talking about, this is an example of someone who, once again, believes that these values are needed and need to come together. And so it shouldn't just be like, we're going to go by ourselves and do what's best for us, and we're not going to create a better world, but both of those things might be able to come together, particularly when it comes to creating these policies. And now, line 25, why? Why? I don't know the answer right away, so I know it's not, remember, a rhetorical question. This must be hypophora. Hypophora, ask a question and then answer. Why? In part, it is because the countries and people of the world today are more interdependent than ever. In truth, it is very rare today that trouble in one part of the globe remains limited in its effect, not just in security, but in trade and finance. Witness the crisis of 1998, which began in Thailand and ended in Brazil. The world is interlocked. And so if I start to look at these paragraphs and how they're like fitting together, first paragraph talks about like these general values of freedom and how these are kind of like, and you have to start thinking about these essays kind of like from a structural standpoint, just like rhetorical analysis, what is happening in each part and how is that kind of affecting the whole? And so we start with these values. We talk about how these values are actually linked to utopia versus utilitarianism. And then we give kind of like an almost like thesis that these things need to merge. And then kind of an explanation. It starts, 25, why? Let me explain to you. So I kind of have like a thesis paragraph in the third one, and then I have an explanation. And then we have an example here of Thailand and Brazil. World is interlocked. So we've got thesis, paragraph 3, example, paragraph 4. This is heightened by mass communication and technology. In Queen Victoria's time, reports of battles came back weeks and months after they were won or lost. Today, we see them enacted live on the BBC, Sky, or CNN. Their very visibility, immediate and in technicolor, inflames feelings that can spread worldwide across different ethnic, religious, and cultural communities. And so this is talking about how technology is impacting the speed of information. So today, more than ever, their problem becomes our problem. And so once again, The world is interconnected, and one person or one country can't have a problem without it kind of affecting the others, even just through the spread of information. Instability is contagious. And again, today more than ever, okay, so we got repetition here. I'm noticing a little bit of repetition again today more than ever. At least ever, nations, at least most of them, crave stability. That's for a simple reason. Our people want it because without it, they don't do or they can't do business and prosper. And so basically, our own well being is tied to being interconnected with others. What brings nations together, what brought them together post September 11th. Okay, so now we have this idea of September 11th, and this must be, in some ways, I'm assuming then he or she or they are actually addressing, the America and September 11th. I'm thinking that's right because I'm seeing September 11th, but we'll see if that pans out. What brought them together post September 11th is the international recognition that the world needs order. Disorder is the enemy of progress. And so, once again, this idea that like people came together because the world needs order, and if everyone is working together, then the world can progress farther. The struggle is for stability, for the security within which progress can be made. Of course, countries want to protect their territorial integrity, but few are into empire building. This is especially true of democracies whose people vote for a higher living standard and punish governments who don't deliver for them. For 2,000 years, Europe fought over territory. And so, talking specifically, and if you don't get it, like you can just like read it again. That's always a great strategy to use. It's like, I'm not trying to understand that. Let's go back and read it again. Struggle for stability, for the security within which progress can be made. And so, once again, progress is only made when people are working together, when people are stable. When people are fighting over these territories, it becomes difficult for people to move together forward and actually make good progress. And so you need to have that balance of like working together and not just trying to do what's best for you at all times, even if that means not expanding into someone else's territory. Today, boundaries are virtually fixed. Governments and people know that any territorial ambition threatens stability and instability threatens prosperity. And so, once again, this next sentence is really, or this next paragraph is really trying to connect that. If you mess with, somebody else's land, for example, that might create instability in the entire world, which is going to be bad for everyone. So, don't try and take advantage of someone else or take their land because ultimately it will create instability and bad news for the world. And so, little late as far as American history and advice goes. But there you have it. And of course, the surest way to stability is through the very values of freedom, democracy, and justice. Where these are strong, the people push for moderation and order. Where they are absent, regimes act unchecked by popular accountability and pose a threat, and the threat spreads. And so regimes mean like the people who are in power, of course, during that time. And of course, the surest way to stability is through the very values of freedom, democracy, and justice. So through these values is how we are going to find stability. Everyone has freedom, everyone has justice, everyone has democracy. And without that, you will see instability or people who are very unhappy with their situations. And so therefore more likely to make things happen in order to change them. And so the people push for moderation and order when they get all those things: freedom, justice, democracy, those same values that were listed in the very beginning. People want things to be moderate so that they stay good, safe, and healthy. So the promotion of these values becomes not just right in itself, but part of the long-term security and prosperity. We can't intervene in every case. Not all of the wrongs of the world can be put right, but where disorder threatens us, we should act. And so you can't be everywhere, but like when there's about to be disorder, when things are about to harm everyone, people should step in. Like it or not, whether you are utilitarian or utopian, the world is interdependent. So repeating that idea, one consequence of this is that foreign and domestic policy are ever more closely interwoven. And so the decisions that I make domestically or at home are going to affect the decisions that are made with other nations. And so you can't really decide that like this is what we're going to do here without it impacting what's going to do other places. And so once again, this is someone in Europe speaking to the American people. And so what the American people are choosing to do are going to impact other people. And so that's kind of like this argument here, like the things you choose to do are going to not just impact you, but impact others as well. It was September 11th that brought these thoughts into sharper focus, watching the horror unfold, imagining the almost unimaginable suffering of thousands of innocent victims of the terror and carnage. The dominant emotion after the obvious feelings of revulsion, sympathy, anger was determination. Marcy, come here. Marcy, Marcy, you got to stop. I'm recording a video right now. Marcy. Okay. All right. You're good. You're good. Okay. All right. Let's try again. Basically talking about the emotions that people were feeling after September 11th. And the dominant emotion was anger, revulsion, sympathy, and determination. The guts and spirits of the people of New York and America in the aftermath of that terrible day were not just admirable, they were awesome. And so talking about the spirit that people showed, definitely to an American audience, most people would probably, if they were alive during this time, take this as a compliment of the guts that people were showing, the spirit that people had in New York and in America on the day after that. They were the best repost to the terrorists that humanity could give, and you should be very proud of that. Okay, so definitely talking to Americans here. America, be proud of how you showed spirit in recovering from that. I want you to know too that the British people were with you from the first moment and will always be with you at times like those. We are not half-hearted friends, and we will never will be. But the determination must be not just to pursue those responsible, bring them to justice, but to learn from September 11th. And so here, this speaker, and we can see on the right side, it's Prime Minister Tony Blair. So this is Tony Blair addressing the citizens of America following 9/11. So we were definitely on the right path with a lot of that. But he's saying, don't just be determined to hold those responsible, but be determined to learn from it as well. And so let's make sure that September 11th or something like it doesn't happen again. Learn from it. There's a real danger that we forget the lessons of September 11th. Human beings recover from tragedy and the memory becomes less fraught. That is a healthy part of living, but we should learn from our experience. And so there's something that he's trying to get the American people to do. And a part of it is not forgetting this lesson, but he hasn't been exactly clear on what this lesson is yet. And so I'm interested in seeing what that is. The most obvious lesson, here he's providing it, the most obvious lesson is indeed our interdependence. For a time, our world stood still. Quite apart from our security, the shock impacted on economic confidence, on business, on trade, and it is only now, with a terrorist network on the run, that confidence is returning. Every nation in the world felt the reverberation of that fateful day, and that has been well illustrated by the role which the United Nations, under Kofi Annan's excellent leadership, has played since September 11th. He's saying, so, like, perhaps America wasn't as aware of like the interdependence of the world. Maybe they were doing things that were more utilitarian and just for America beforehand. And maybe he's saying we need to learn and don't forget, like, when this happened, like it revealed how interconnected all of our nations are, and maybe don't forget that. I'm not sure, but that's my guess as for where he's going with this. So if we didn't know it before, we know it now. These events and our response to them shape the fate not of one nation, but of the world. Okay, and so how you respond will impact other people, and so be aware of that. For America, it has laid bare the reality. American power affects the world fundamentally. It is there, it is real, it is never irrelevant. It can affect the world for good or for bad. Stand aside or engage, it never fails to affect. And so saying even when like America as a country has chosen not to get involved in something, like it affects people. And so like it's that kind of, I'm getting that kind of like Spider-Man vibe of like great power comes great responsibility. And so he's saying there is a great power there, so make sure you're probably like responsible with it. I want it engaged under President Bush. I'm confident it will be, and for good. But if that's what I and many others want, it comes at a price for us too. It means we don't shirk our responsibility. It means that when America is fighting for those values, then however tough, we fight with her. No grandstanding, no offering implausible but impractical advice from the comfort of the touchline. No wishing away the hard, not easy choices, but working together side by side. And so there's that last paragraph which really says, like, once again, like, we're with you, we have your back, and we are, coming together to support those values. And so it's a kind of a mixed bag here. It kind of goes from like, we have to be aware of like the two things in the world. There's the ideals, but also like it makes it difficult to kind of implement them. You have to make hard choices. And then don't be utilitarian. That's lines with utilitarian and utopian. But we have this like Don't be one or the other, be both. You have to be able to put that like hard political pragmatism along with those ideals in order to create a better world for everybody, and be careful with your choices, because what America chooses impacts the world, as he was speaking to it in 2001. So that was a whole lot, but definitely feel like we got a good understanding of the reading. And so once again, investing a little bit more time here, but I promise the answers will be easier to come up with, and you'll be able to fly through the questions much quicker if you invest the time. So let's get into it, and let's see if we can use process of elimination to eliminate a couple of these. And so in opening the speech, Prime Minister Blair engages with his audience by immediately, and then before you read the answers, there are red herrings here. A red herring is like an answer that looks good, but is not actually good. And so, and sometimes people call it like a distractor answer. Don't read the answer first. Go back to the beginning and be like, what does he do to engage the audience at the beginning of the speech? Cover up those A, B, C, D, E, and go back to the beginning and say, if I was just answering this on my own, what does this author do to engage the people, the audience early on? And so I'm going to read it now. The purpose of being in politics is to strive for the values and ideals we believe in, freedom, justice, what we Europeans call sincerity, but you might call respect for others. And so right away, hitting on ideas of freedom and justice. These are kind of like these quote unquote like typical American ideals, and what we Europeans you call respect for others. So he's trying to speak directly to values and ideals, and how everyone wants these like values, but that like it gets tougher when you start to translate those values into the world. So that's kind of the answer. Then you look here and you're like, oh, is that talking politics? I mean, kind of like, I guess if you want to say like American politics, freedom, stuff like that, but it's not like I mean, he is talking politics, but like that doesn't feel like it's the exact like perfect fit. And so like I'm not crossing off, but I'm not thinking it's the one either. Referring to the ideals the masses believes in. This sounds like it. Ideals, value, freedom, all that. I think it's B. So I'm going to circle B. I think it's that. But once again, you have to continue reading on just to make sure you can mark them all off. Referring to the need for hard-headed pragmatism. I mean, like that's not going to like appeal to the masses like B would, so I don't think that's as good. But once again, I still wouldn't like cross it off because it happens. It happens in part one, but it's not as like spot on. And if you didn't cover them up, you would be like, oh yeah, he talks about politics. Oh yeah, he says hard-headed pragmatism, and you might choose A or C when like B looks like it's the right answer right here. So translating values into the practical world we live in, once again, that's the same thing as C. It talks about it, but it doesn't seem like that would like engage the audience in the same way that these ideals do. And then E, directing attention to international affairs, that doesn't happen at all. So I can cross off E, but the messed up part about this test is A, B, C, and D are all correct. It's like which one is most correct, and I think it's B. So I'm going to mark down B and move on to number 16. The sentence that best expresses the essence of the message of the speech. And so I got to think to myself, what is the message of this speech? Well, there's a couple different things. It talked about the fact that people are, once again, we need to bring these two things together to make sure that, it's not just one idea of politics or the other, but it's actually both of these. It talks about being careful with responsibility, and it talks about how the people will not stand alone. And so like when I'm thinking about all that, I think it's probably like the American people won't stand alone. It's probably like this interconnectedness, but I need to look at the answers now and see. But once again, important to get your answer first before you actually look at them. Disorder is the enemy of progress. That's a point that's made, but the whole thing is not about how we need to make progress. The whole thing is about how kind of we're interconnected. So A, once again, not going to cross it off, but I don't think that's it. In truth, it is very rare today that people in one part of the globe remains limited. Okay, so this is definitely, once again, this is getting close. I feel like that could be it. So B becomes the front runner. We are not half-hearted friends, and we never will be. That's true once again, and it hits on that interconnected idea, but it's not as good as B. And it's the whole point of the speech is not just to say that Britain's with you. It's to talk about more of the interconnectedness. And so I think B is our front runner so far. American power affects the world fundamentally. That is also a huge point here, a big point that's made. And when I'm thinking about like how Tony Blair wanted to impact the American audience, that was probably a big part of it. I don't know if it's like the essence of the speech though, but D's a good answer, but I still think B is a little bit stronger. So if we didn't know it before, we know it now. These events and our response to them shape the fate not of one nation, but of one world. Okay, and E is also that's that interconnected again. The fate of one nation, but the fate of the world. All right, so ultimately, D was a decent answer, but I'm thinking B and E are both good, so let's read them both over again. In truth, it is very rare today that trouble in one part of the globe remains limited in its effect. It speaks to the interconnectedness, but it seems like it's much stronger when it says how we respond to events will shape the fate of not one nation but the world. I think E just does a better job of it. Like B is there, it's on that idea, but I think E is probably the stronger one because it literally says like one nation, one world. It has both of those there in that answer, and so this is why this test is so difficult because they're literally both right, and you have to figure out like which one is more the essence of the speech. And one of them says nation, one world, and that sounds like it to me. But like B is also correct. It just seems maybe a little more like kind of evidence or explaining it. And so let me go ahead and check to see exactly where we're at. So 16 and 15. Flip through, flip through, flip through. Sorry for the delay. Drum roll. Yes. All right, correct. We were right. It is B, like we thought for 15, and E, like we thought for 16. And so, like I said, it's tough because you got multiple ones that are right, but you got to figure out which one is most correct. And so, with that, I'm going to wish you good luck on the rest. Remember, try and use that process of elimination, get that practice in, even if it's taking more time than you want to right now. It'll be really helpful when we get to that time when it's actually the test. And you got to do it under pressure. And so you got to build that kind of like understanding of how to take the test. And then once we have that, we can start to speed along and speed up. Once again, it does you no good to check the answers right now before you give it a crack and try it on your own. Because when you are sitting and taking the test in the spring, you will think back to times like these, and you want to make sure that you're doing your best to take advantage. And so, with that, I hope you have a great rest of your Friday. I hope you have a good weekend, and I will see you back on Tuesday. And once again, don't forget, you have to just hand in the notes for Tuesday's class this week, just those like notes on I Want a Wife, and then you are choosing and doing both of those paragraphs. So we did paragraph 3 together today, but you need to make sure you go back and do paragraph 1 and 2, the body paragraphs for I Want a Wife. And if you got any questions, like I said, let me know. r.anderson@puckschools.org is my email. I'm available by phone as well. So if you want to text a quick question, that'll usually be a quicker response than email. Number is 440-670-6979. And yeah, I'm here to help and support, even if I'm not really here. And so give me a text or an email if you have any questions. But have a great weekend. And yeah, I will see you next week.